If you just joined us, you're still watching The Pulse. We've been talking about happenings in Parliament. Right now in the studio, I've been joined by two experts in political marketing. Kobe Mensah is from the University of Ghana Business School, and Professor Jennifer Leeds Marsh is from the University of Auckland from New Zealand. Very refreshing to have you.
Excellent. Thank you, Aisha.
Let me start with you, Dr. Kobe Mensah. You are here with us, and so you actually know the terrain.
Yes,
I first of all want to have your appreciation of what actually happened at the Ayawaso West Wagon when the by-election was underway.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I think there are two things. One, obviously the thuggery that actually happened at the by-elections, which extensively, the community in Ghana has actually, condemned. I think it was very unfortunate for us to have that scene of almost like a very chaotic, by-elections. And I'm sure that it was not that most, civil society, of course, political watchers have actually condemned it. And obviously, onwards, after that is the parliamentary, sworn in of Lydia and Honorable Lydia Hassan now, and the kind of action that the minority actually took. Not necessarily, for me, not necessarily the walking away, but the placards, displaying a bloody widow. I think it's quite unfortunate, especially in a time where we want to encourage a lot of female participation in elections. Already, women shun away from politics because of the negativity, and we didn't actually expect, an intensity of that sort that would, further push women away. I think what we must strive is to encourage a lot of women participation, even if we're not happy with the kind of so-called government-sponsored, thuggery. We shouldn't actually go to the brink of calling this young lady bloody widow. I think it's very, very unfortunate, and we must actually condemn that.
Prof, I know violence everywhere. You may not be in Ghana for such a long time, but violence, election violence everywhere, definitely it's not acceptable, I'm sure.
Yeah, of course, nobody wants to see that in a democracy. I mean, Ghana is, supposed to be one of the safest countries in Africa, and you need to try and keep that going.
Okay, so before we continue with this conversation, we've been told that earlier today, MP for Tamale, and you heard the Speaker of Parliament calling for apology from the minority. Now, Inusuf Hussaini is a member of the minority, a senior member of the minority, and he's MP for Tamale, and he says that the majority should not expect any apology from them. Listen.
Of the policemen were directly connected with the by-elections in the area, in the constituency. Indeed, the disturbances and violence visited on unsuspecting civilians by these masked marauding beasts prowling the polling stations were tangential to the elections. And why do you think that we should separate them?
That's why you don't recognize the candidates.
That's why we will not dignify the swearing-in process of a product of a bloody process with our presence.
Why do you call her bloody widow?
Because she's a product of she's a direct beneficiary of the violence in the U.S. and also constitution.
You don't think that's heartless, distasteful, as some persons have described it?
It's what is heartless about it? Words take their color from their surroundings. We went into a by-election. We experienced violence that has never been experienced before. We saw impunity of levels that we have never witnessed in this country.
Why do you tag her with that?
Because she's the beneficiary.
She didn't control the security forces on that day.
Who do you want us to tag?
Well, there's Brian Champon who's owned up.
Well, Brian Champon is not contesting elections. We have identified our victim. You take your victim as you find him. We've identified our victim, and our victim is Lydia Hassan. And she's a direct beneficiary of the process. And now we're going for her. And we aren't stopping.
So that's Inusuf Hussaini, a member of the minority. And if you recall, the minority side walked out of Parliament yesterday and marched to the police headquarters to demand justice for their colleague Sam George, who was assaulted during the Ayawaso West Wagon by-election.
May I now invite the the honourable member-elect to be conducted into the chamber for administration of the oaths.
Cannot be here to witness this swearing.
Deputy Leader.
As the majority in this House, and in the absence of the majority leader, the leader of government business, Mr. Speaker, we would not be perturbed by the absence of the other side. Business will continue as usual.
I,
Lydia Seyram Al-Hassan,
do in the name of Almighty God swear.
Do in the name of God, Almighty God swear.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Republic of Ghana as by law established.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Republic of Ghana as by law established.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations on your membership of the House.
So that's what ensued yesterday in Parliament when the newly elected MP was sworn in and was welcomed to the chamber. Now, you have the Speaker of Parliament a while ago, the Deputy Speaker of Parliament, Jose Osu, saying that the clerk should play the video and identify each member of the minority that held that placard that with the inscription "Bloody Widow." And I want to find out from you, Dr. Kobi, you are political marketing mogul, if I should say, and you know that members of Parliament normally would enjoy some immunity to allow them go, do their jobs very well. How does it come across to you that now the Speaker is picking all the videos and then pointing out all the members who held the placard to be punished separately or individually?
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm not an expert in what you call parliamentary affairs, so perhaps I can have a little, kind of view on that. But generally speaking, when you go on to that tangent of negativity, I'm sure the political brand is what are actually denigrating, because obviously the larger majority of the country actually do not want to see such an approach. And of course, when you're in a position, wanting to be in government, this is not what you want to do. And I think it's because of lack of understanding of how political brands are supposed to behave, especially in connection with voters when you are in opposition. So of course, the parliamentary process would I'm sure will go on. Whatever sanctions that perhaps per their rules and procedures could be meted up, but they must be, minded about the bigger picture. You want to be in government. You want to be seen as an alternative to the government. You want people to like the brand. And I'm surprised because the NDC, since the time of Professor John Mills, had taken time to rebuild the brand to a level that has been so acceptable by quite a lot of people. I mean, a large sway of people, especially women. NDC has a lot of women following. So to go on that tangent, I think it's very, very unfortunate. They have to be mindful of the brand and not to soil the brand's image. So
there are those who also feel that the silence by the government in power, I'm talking of the ruling NPP, could also be a dent or on their fortunes, their political fortunes.
Of course, I mean, I think that the beginning of all this is because of the Thagri during the elections, which is very, very bad. I think that the NPP itself, as a party that actually calls itself a party of due process, having gone to that level where you have actually injected, that kind of violence into the process, actually dent massively the image of the party. Because if you're a party of due process, a party of, civility, etc., which they used to say that the NDC is much more violent than them, in the time past. And of course, having assumed, that position, remember, you actually eroding the heritage of the, one of the, biggest, political parties in this country. So that is very, very unfortunate. Both parties have to be aware of what it means by a political brand, and things that you do that would actually erode the gains that they've made over the years since 1992 when we started this constitutional project. I think that on the larger front, the brand of Ghana, that is the Ghanaian brand, is what you have actually dissipated internationally, because it is very, very unfortunate for these pictures to go international, and then you ask yourself, stable democracy in Africa, a benchmark for even some European countries, could actually go on to that tangent. I think that's very serious, and we must take the investigations. I think we've called into investigation into the issue what happened. I wish that there will be a thorough investigation so that the perpetrators can be brought to book. Not only those in Parliament holding the placards, but those who actually began the entire process, i.e., brutalizing people during the by-election, so that we can see fairness, from both sides, and then we can actually be satisfied with the process.
Prof, I know you've been around and you've been lecturing, you've been engaged in some series of lectures. How is it going for you? How are the people also responding to your lectures on political marketing?
There's great interest in political marketing. There's a few fears that some politicians may be sceptical of the new approach, but as we've made clear, it's just like business. Whichever politician or party adopts the more effective and superior approach to political marketing will have the competitive edge. And there's also been discussion of how the trends in Ghana mean that there's increasing volatility in the electorate, people are better educated and more aware, and thus it is really ripe for the introduction of high quality political marketing. And by that what I mean is parties really listening effectively to the voters and doing research to understand them better and segment the market, and then creating a product that will meet those needs and demands. And by that we don't mean promising the earth. We mean that they shouldn't make too many grand promises they can't deliver. Instead, they should be more costed and more mature.
But why at all do we even need political marketing? Because if we already have our followers and whatever we tell them they will do we need any marketing?
Well, I'm not sure that is the case. I mean, the fact that you changed party, the last election means that it's not straightforward anymore. And as I just said, people are becoming more educated and more aware. They're also, you've only got to be here, particularly as a visitor, and try and get around on the roads in Accra. It's amazing how long it takes. Things are not always in a good state. So they need better government, and better government comes from politicians being in touch with the people and understand their priorities, and also creating honest promises that they can deliver instead of just false promises that just to get into power and then doing nothing when they're there.
But one observation I've made, a lot of times you see political parties actually campaigning and getting up there, and then just at once they just bring it. All their efforts is down. You can put this, one of the examples, if you had Doc explaining, the NDC has spent some time over the period to build a setting, because if you're coming from a revolutionary background and you're coming from there, you want people to now dissociate you from that era. Then you come to a point and then you come and start all over again. Which areas are we lagging in Ghana?
Well, to be honest, that's quite similar to some of the behaviour we've seen in Western liberal democracies, where a party's got out of power, they don't quite understand why, they're not willing to admit they may have gone wrong and that they need to change, and then a party leader will try and reform them and rebrand, and then there'll be some incident like the one we've just seen where party members revert to the original way of behaving. And it's because they don't have the results of market research, because there isn't such extensive polling consultancy here. There needs to be. And they're just not aware that being in politics in a democracy means thinking about everything from the voter perspective, not you, the politician, and what you think and what you think is best. It's about what the voters think of you. So that behaviour, that imagery, is so anti-women, and that will alienate, a significant part of the female voter market. That is a really silly thing to be doing going into an election. It also suggests a level of immaturity, which again suggests they're not ready to govern. So it doesn't even matter whether they were right or wrong in terms of the actual principle, but the imagery and the immature nature of the behaviour, unfortunately, will just reduce the quality of their brand and their brand
reduce
perception.
the quality of that brand. Doc, I know in every misfortune there is a blessing, so they say. And you, in looking at the field that you work, how can these two major political parties turn around this misfortune into a political blessing?
Yeah, I think that both sides have actually seen the outcry from the general public. Obviously, first of all was the MPP. When that violence actually was unleashed, the entire country actually stood up and said that was wrong. Unfortunately, the NDC also went ahead to do the kind of display that they did in Parliament. And again, the entire country has actually risen up to condemn it. So I'm sure that they would pick up some lessons from there and say that the Ghanaian has actually risen above some of these negativities. And no one wants to go back to those days where you could actually do anything and still people will support you in that sense. So I think that the best part of it is that they have seen and they have heard the utmost outcry of the general public that they oppose some of these, negativities in the political system, and therefore they will take some lessons and make sure that they can address. And that's what we're talking about. They should listen to the new forms of political engagement, the new forms of listening to the voter, making sure that you're responding to the very needs of the voter, and making an emotional connection to the voter in order that you could actually present yourself as a very good political brand. And I'm sure they will take these lessons, and from what we have actually been talking, advocating for all these years, and I'm sure that they can actually repair. And generally, they must come out to apologize to the general public that the conduct is definitely unacceptable. And once they apologize and then put measures in place that they are rectifying, and therefore they will behave very responsibly, I'm sure they will win back some of the voters.
I think Prof made mention of resources as one of the challenges that may be facing the political parties, but I know that once a political party comes from opposition to government, then they shouldn't have challenges with resources. At least that's what we've seen over the years. And then if you're in opposition, then I agree you have challenges with resources. But hey, what do you think is accounting for this whole mess we're seeing? Is it that the political parties themselves do not care about their brands anymore, or you think they are just complacent?
I think the resources here is lack of knowledge. They do not have the human capacity in terms of expertise, in terms of skills that they could actually deploy to behave as modern parties behave. So therefore they must be put on training. A lot of them, they're frontline communications officers, their backroom strategists, etc. The policy makers themselves. I think that they've got to be put on training to build their capacity of understanding modern way of politicking, modern way of political strategy, etc., modern way of voter engagement. Then they could actually be capable of responding to some of the complex voter needs as we have it. Obviously, when you come into government, you may have money, you may have logistics available, but that's not enough. You need a very good kind of knowledge base that would actually allow you to kind of respond to the complex voter needs as we have it. And of course, the same goes to the opposition parties. We need to educate our people. We need to educate the political class to understand the modern political system, how it works, so that they will be competently good enough to handle the voter expectations, etc.
Prof, how do we deal with this challenge? Because we certainly have to move from here.
Well, the key thing is for parties to send their staff to Kobe Mensah and other colleagues, and we've met a number of colleagues who are getting educated and trained in political marketing, who can then teach and train the practitioners. And they've also got to be open to thinking in a different way. A lot of people think that political marketing is about ads and spin doctoring. Well, actually, and propaganda, and it's actually not. The whole point, just with business marketing, is that you create a product the market wants, and that involves changing your thinking. So the key thing with effective political marketing is to be strategic and think and listen and reflect. And that, yes, that may require some training for your staff, but it also means being open to the new ideas.
I want to believe that political marketing is a two-way affair, because if the politician is doing the marketing, who is a politician marketing to the voter, the electorate. It means that the electorate's response or feedback from the electorate is also very important.
Yes.
How can the electorate demand the best or demand value from the politicians?
Well, one thing is they need to be careful to not demand what cannot be delivered either. So they need to be careful that they don't believe over grand promises, and they think about their community, not just themselves, and they ask their politicians to produce costed, realistic policies, not false promises.
Okay.
So in some ways the voters also have to mature, and then they also need to, you know, get involved and let their voice be heard.
Unfortunately, that's what we see most of the times in for instance, in Africa, in Ghana, for instance, that politicians make big promises. They come to power, they cannot fulfill their promises. Why do you think this is happening? Is it because the electorates are demanding too much, or is simply the politicians they're taking the electorates for granted?
I think maybe the politicians aren't wise enough to realise you might actually gain more trust and get more votes, particularly in the long run for the second term, if you promise less and deliver more. And that's generally what politicians and parties in the West learnt 20 years ago. Because until then, they used to do the same thing, lots of rhetoric. And then they learnt, but if you make costed pledges that you can actually deliver, then in the first term you will win repeat custom. Voters will trust you and vote for you again.
Yeah. And also, I think that generally we should also apply what we see internationally. I mean, a lot of Ghanaians have been exposed to Western democracies. I mean, through media, we watch a lot of CNN. A lot of people watch CNN, BBC. Obviously through travel, and then of course the tourism, as we're having exchanges, across the globe. I mean, we have to respond to the global best practices, the way citizens elsewhere actually demand from their politicians, and be realistic in our demands as we go along. Of course, most of the time you realize that perhaps we tend to be shunning away from questioning, from critiquing. And I have said some time ago that it looks like we are becoming content with failure. Obviously, when people have failed, we've got to let them know that they failed, and therefore we shouldn't actually put our vote.
But if you keep asking questions and you don't get the answers, I mean, I think apathy sets in.
It does, but it's not good enough for us to stand away or to actually be out of the political process. We have to engage, because if you keep shunning the political process, the negativity or the failure keeps going.
Nothing will change.
Exactly. So we still have to keep engaging, but making sure that we are critical in our engagement, asking the tough questions, and making sure that we are expecting realistic, what you call promises from the politicians.
I'm much interested in what she said, that you promise less and deliver more. That's what it should be. That's the status quo. But that is not what we see in our part of the world. How can we move away from here?
Yeah.
I think it requires, drawing on international experience, it requires a brave leader and a good set of advisors around him or her to decide, look, we need to start changing, we need to do this differently. And whoever chooses to do that will reap the electoral dividends and improve democracy at the same time. And then you'll find the other politicians and parties will come on board and will copy. But yes, Ghana effectively is looking for that entrepreneurial trailblazer, innovative leader who's brave enough to say, look, we're not going to promise you what we can't deliver, but this is what we can realistically do in the first term. Vote for us, we will work hard to make sure it happens, and then they will offer more for the second term.
Let's look at the opposition in this whole scenario, and of course, if you're looking at how they can use this misfortune as a blessing, a political blessing, how can they go about this whole thing?
First of all, I think they need a very good introspection of the approach that they've been using. Obviously, we have said that our political parties don't research enough, to understand the situations. I mean, where are the voters in terms of their perspective about them? Most parties do not know how the voters actually think about them, and they have this delusional thinking that they command almost about 45% of the electorate. That is not the reality. The reality is that the votes are actually swinging, and that's why we've been having that volatility where we kick parties out and we bring another one in. So I think they need to have a very good introspection based on research, understanding what the people think about them, and using that knowledge going forward to brand themselves and to also elect leaders that actually are capable of connecting the voters to themselves, to the parties, and then they can actually win. So I think that the opposition have to go back and make sure that they can do a very good research about what it is that people expect them to do, what is the current image that people have about them, and then use that information, that knowledge, to advance their course going forward.
So we've just agreed, or you've admitted that research is very important in all of this.
Crucial.
But of course, if you are recommending that political parties engage in research, which areas would you recommend they start from?
Well, in terms of the type of research?
Yeah. The type
well,
of
both
research.
quantitative and qualitative. So quantitative, like polling, will tell you where they're at. And you also might be able to find out what their priorities are, like not just what do you want, but what's most important, because there's so much voters want.
I'm actually looking at which areas, because they have different levels of, I mean, the electorate.
Oh, you mean the regions?
You have different levels. You have the elites, you have the grassroots level, you have the rural folks and all of that. So if a political party needs to start researching now, which areas would you recommend that they start from? Where is
well, it's not the elite, because that's themselves. And the whole point of political marketing is to not look at yourself, but to look at others. Just as the point of democratic politics is to serve society. So in terms of the actual voters, the different regions and the different types of people, it might, I mean, ideally everybody, but in reality, it might be that there were some people who never support your party. So you look at the others, the people who might be persuadable. You might have more to add in terms of the Ghanaian people.
Correct. I mean, usually you want to look at where your core base is, and then make sure that, for example, if you know that the youth, you're actually lacking in terms of connecting the youth, then you want to know exactly what the youth think about, what can actually connect you to the youth. Yeah. Obviously, you're looking at segmenting the entire voter groups, and as Jennifer said, not everybody is going to vote for you. So as you segment, and then you can target, you can actually use those as a basis of your research. And of course, there are some times that you realize that some segment are not actually for you, but you can make some gains, you can make some inroads by understanding exactly the reason why they don't like you, and working on those reasons, and then making sure that you can actually connect to that. So I think that, yes, there's so much that we can do. And you see, the point is that most of our political parties only get to work when it's getting to elections. And that's been the problem. And political marketing is not like that. It's about, the off-peak period. What do you do during the off-peak period? Yeah. How do you prepare yourself? How do you, hold the community engagement? How do you do the focus groups? And to get to know really before you start preparing, before you get to the elections. But you realize that in most of the cases, our political parties go to sleep immediately after the election.
And that's the opposite of what they should do. Because ideally, if you've done political marketing effectively, by the time it gets to the election, you'll have little to do. It will just be the final sale, because you will have researched the market, listened to voters, understood their wants and needs, their priorities, developed a set of key policies to respond to that are deliverable, and then worked on very interactive and relational type communication to build a relationship with people, so people understand what you are and understand that you're in tune with their needs. And then the campaign is actually the last thing that's actually supposed to be the least important. So they need to switch it round. They need to wake up now and realise the campaign is least important.
It's least important. And of course, in all of this, we've talked about 2020 because it's staring us, it's just around the corner. What are your expectations as a political marketing strategist?
My expectation is we have a lot of work to do, because on the backdrop of Iowa, so that tells you that we probably have to go back and start engaging positively. In fact, the entire stakeholders have to start thinking that how do we eliminate some of these issues, and then make sure that we have a very quality, elections. And by that I mean civil society, voters, I mean regulators, and then international, community. That is the development partners. We've got to really start thinking that, okay, we must step back and make sure that we are doing the right thing. Political parties need to start training their people in strategy, not in violence, making sure that they can start empowering people. When people lack strategy and the way forward of handling situations, that's when they resort to the insult, they resort to the bad negativities, etc., as we've been saying. But when they are capable of campaigning and knowing that they're capable of connecting to the voters, you wouldn't actually start strategizing negatively how to stop the ballot box, how to intimidate voters from coming to the election, because you're capable.
You focus on what you've got to offer rather than criticising the opposition. So you focus on proposing good policies instead of opposing. And then you look more like a future government or a good current government.
So Prof, what should we expect from your project? How has it been, and what more should we expect, and how does it fit into our 2020 plan?
I think what we've got to look out for now that there is growing awareness of political marketing, thanks to the efforts of Dr. Mensah at the University of Ghana and colleagues at other universities too, is we're going to look for that bright, clever, wise leader who can actually use political marketing effectively now, and look now about who is seen to be thinking and listening. And there might be, particularly the opposition, because you're going to change your flag bearer, they might be people you haven't actually thought of yet. So particularly the media, look out for new politicians who aren't on the agenda yet. See if they are thinking in what we call a market-oriented way, listening to voters in a mature way.
All right, I'm very grateful this afternoon that you joined us. And Professor Jennifer Lee is a political marketing strategist, and she's from
Auckland.
Okay,
The
and
University of Auckland.
Kobe Mensah, Dr. Kobe Mensah is also a political marketing expert with the University of Ghana Business School. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.